Good afternoon, and welcome to the memorial service and celebration of the life of our mother, Isabella Houssaye. I'm Kase, this is my brother David, and we're the two oldest of Isabella's 5 children. On behalf of our entire family, we'd like to thank you for attending today. It would mean everything to our mother to have you all here. And I just want to say one thing, it is an unseasonably warm day, and I can feel that it's her smile beaming down on us, so she's very grateful for you all to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for all the support you have offered our family for these past 6 years. In particular, we want to express special gratitude for those of you who have felt this pain before. Whether in losing someone close to you far too soon, or in fighting your own battle with cancer. As painful as this shared experience is, it makes your support feel even more meaningful.
Our mother wanted this service to be filled with joy and happiness from beginning to end. We'll do our best, but we can't make any promises that there won't be a few tears, so we'd like to apologize to her in advance for any deviation from that no tears rule.
Our father, in particular, asks for a special shout out in case he can't speak coherently today.
Over the last 6 years, our mother gave us the occasional insight into what she wanted and what she did not want at her funeral. We've made every effort to adhere to her wishes, and hopefully, as a result, you will see her and feel her here today.
Foremost of our mother's requests was that she be heard in her own voice at her own funeral. As unusual as the request as that is, we've done our best to honor it. So, without further ado, our mother.
I'll give Kyle my legs, and he's gonna give me the spirit.
Everybody fights today! Here we go! Here we go!
Go ahead and try again, and eventually you'll make it.
Like, I know anything is possible.
If you can't stay focused in the moment and you jump ahead to the totality of what you're endeavoring, you defeat yourself. It has to be that in this moment, can I move forward? Yes, take the next step, one after another. And that's how it goes. But if you try to think, oh, I have, 13 hours of hard work, it's overwhelming. So one step at a time. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in February 2018, and at that point in time, I was very, very sick. I had cancer in my spine and all over my body, my brain. It was, and not able to move, and I had lost the ability to do what I love, which is swim, bike, run, and that was very hard. And I recently, 2 weeks ago, found out that the cancer's progressing. So I'm sort of back to square one of trying to figure out a treatment option. But it's really great to be here and be an athlete and not a patient. I go right into radiation next week, so we're gonna try that. I just think it's important, I never wanted to be defined by one thing, whether it was motherhood, my job, and certainly not by a diagnosis. So I feel like I'm a lot of different things. I'm an athlete, I am a mother, I have a business, and it's the totality of those things that define me, and being a patient's not gonna be that. There's so much you can learn from triathlon. The mental side is probably even more important than the physical part, and that's just staying tough, sticking with it, and when you have obstacles, moving through them. It's been a great physical and mental training for me. It's actually been wonderful for me to get back to the physical participation in Ironman and the training, and it's just amazing to see what the body responds to. When doctors and people tell me that I'm limited and that I won't be able to participate in these, and I can go out and train and watch my body get stronger, and prove them wrong, it just feels great. And it's just as amazing what the body is able to do. I sort of told myself, you have to think positively and you have to keep trying. And little by little, it came back. But I think that the positive thinking really makes a difference. And that's something that I'm not gonna lose. Actually, there's a great line. It's not about managing your fears, it's about expanding your comfort zones. And I try really to just continue to expand my comfort zone, so I'm increasingly comfortable with, my health ups and downs and the obstacles that come my way. And I think that makes a huge difference. Fear is not a helpful emotion. You're not defeated till you stop trying, and I'm not going to stop trying, so I'm not going to be defeated. Finishing in Kona last year, that was just the most amazing feeling. I was given a spot in Kona because I had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and that had been a dream, and the Ironman Foundation made that dream come true, and it was just amazing.
Isabella Livaudais, you are an Ironman!
The crowds, the energy, the realization that it was really going to happen. It was so just brilliant and overwhelming, and my whole family was there, and everyone was cheering. My parents were there at the finish line, and it just was amazing. It was the best feeling. I felt like if I had died that day, life would have been good. It was great.
Let us be seated. Friends, the warmest welcome to all of you to this service in loving memory of Isabella Livaudais. I am Allison Bowden, and I serve here at Princeton as Dean of this chapel. We gather to remember a truly extraordinary human being, and no single service could ever do her justice, so that's not our plan for today. It is simply to be together, to take comfort in one another, and to rejoice in the spirit that Isabella inhabited in the way she lived her life and approached her death, and to be thankful for having had her with us at all. Thank you so much for being here. We'll hear reflections first from Reverend Brian Kelly, one of Isabella's chaplains at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Good afternoon. It was an unexpected, humbling, and at the moment, deeply sad honor when Isabella asked me months ago to stand here when this day came. And intimidating for sure. In this sacred space filled with so many who loved this remarkable person for decades, I am certainly one who knew her for the shortest period. We met in March of 2018 at one of her first visits to our Rockefeller Outpatient Center. I was all of 8 months into this second career, making cold calls on new chemo patients at the request of our nursing staff, who recognized as many of those folks can be understandably anxious. I was blissfully unaware that weeks before, Isabella had firmly checked no on the questionnaire about chaplain visits. When I poked my head into the chemo bay, I think David will recall that a very skeptical and yet always very gracious Isabella looked me up and down and reluctantly agreed to meet with the chaplain. When she saw that I didn't wear a clerical collar and was happy to talk with her about anything but God, I made it through the audition. My brief chart notes from that first visit today seem laughably naive. Patient appears emotionally and spiritually strong, intellectually curious. I had no clue then of the depth of the strength that I would come to witness, or the sweetness of the friendship that I would come to treasure. We shared over 80 visits in 6 years of treatment, and she probably had twice that number of other appointments at MSK and elsewhere. Now, anyone reading her remarkable obituary in the Times, and especially those who knew her as you did, would recognize that Isabella was Newton's first law set before our eyes, her body constantly in motion. And it would have remained fully so had it not been, in Newton's phrase, acted upon by an external force, the inexplicable first shadows on the CT scan of the most fit and healthy human anyone could have imagined. As you know, the shocking diagnosis did not stop the motion, of course. It only paused it. I came to know that most every day we met had begun before dawn in Lawrenceville, on a bike, in a pool, or running down a quiet road. But as David observed, while Isabella often dreaded her 6-hour infusions, they gave her a rare gift, a time of quiet and contemplation when all that motion could be and had to be stilled for a while. Many days I'd find her in our waiting room, curled in a lotus position in a chair by massive windows 16 floors above the tugs and barges of the East River, She'd work on her laptop and soak in the warmth of the streaming sunlight until she was called back to give some more blood. And then into clinic to take stock and strategize with Dr. Mark Chris, her brilliant and committed guide on this journey. And then on to the infusion bay. Now, chaplains train, as they should, in the importance of maintaining boundaries with our patients. But those quickly came down as Isabella invited me into her extraordinary life, the life where she had spent pushing herself beyond boundaries. It was part of my job to give her a safe place to share her burdens, but she quickly returned the favor to me pro bono. We would talk briefly about her latest scans and chemo regimen, and then we'd move on to what mattered to her. Training for the next marathon, usually in a distant country I'd never likely visit. We'd segue to theater. She believed firmly that a post-chemo Broadway show was clearly part of the treatment plan. We'd trade new writers she had discovered for poems from my divinity school classes and explore the many joys and occasional sorrows of parenting our very adult offspring. And sometimes, we talk about her sense of a sustaining and positive force of creation, a dimension of good and of love in the universe that just didn't happen to look like God, as many use that word. A force she said she could see every day in the eyes of her sons and her daughter. Isabella asked me, another lapsed lawyer, what drew me to this work later in life. Our boundaries long gone, I shared a story of loss and recovery where I could not find God in my pain. And yet I came to see God's hand everywhere in those who cared for me on my winding path back to health and back to faith. In the same way, I could not see God in any patient's cancer, surely not Isabella's. But I felt God's presence each time she held on through the pain, each time she shared her hopes for the next clinical trial, each new story of gratitude. I told her that along the way I had discovered an expression from the Jesuit theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin that has helped shape my journey. He famously observed, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Isabella, whose Catholic roots, like my own, ran deep, liked that idea very much. You all know her as a deeply spiritual being whose journey was the ultimate in human experiences. She faced her diagnosis and countless treatments, procedures, and side effects with the full range of human emotions, from fear and doubt to hope and courage. Isabella was always a realist, by temperament, by training, and by experience, to be sure. Her knowledge of the cancer she lived with and the state of the art in its treatment was encyclopedic and clinically precise. But that realism was matched within her by an indefatigable hope, deep trust in her team, and a profound belief in the power of research to solve the insolvable. And her hope was always sustained by the love of her extraordinary clan and the peace she found on the bike with the wind in her face as the miles flew by. I told several of Isabella's nurses that I would be here today. They shared stories of the quiet strength of this extraordinary woman who walked this road with so much grace and wry humor, and perhaps most incredible, with deep gratitude for her life with all its challenges, for her beloved family, and for friends, and for those of us fortunate enough to be caring for her, especially for Dr. Chris and his gifted team. Her quiet courage humbled me on many days, those days when she was my chaplain, days when, as those scary drugs were flowing into her, all she wanted to talk about was how I was doing. I will miss Isabella, but she remains in my heart as I continue this work. She taught me how to do it better, as she showed me what it means to fully embrace life with humility, with gratitude, and with hope, and with a spirit that cancer could not crush. I wish I'd met her at a dinner party, at an off-Broadway play about to be a smash, or maybe as my seatmate on a flight to yet another marathon with one of her kids. Meeting her as a patient was a hard gift, but a gift nonetheless. She made my life better simply by stepping into it, feeding my soul with the energy and hope that she spread to those she touched, those like so many of you. The poet Christian Wyman, himself a survivor of a rare blood cancer for the last 15 years, wrote this of the doctors and nurses who have cared for him. Their aspect is the aspect of souls that, having seen the worst, work forever now to see it through, to see through it. Isabella's soul shared that aspect. She applied that fierce intellect, her bottomless energy, and an unimaginable tolerance for pain to find, support, and endure the treatment that might save her life and those of countless others. For the forever that she was given, she too had seen the worst and worked to see it through, and indeed, to see through it. Thank you for the chance to join with you to honor Isabella, and may her memory be a blessing to us all.
As it is in Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever.
Isabella was my dear friend for 34 years. Just as she pushed herself, she pushed me too. Once in late October, she called and urged me to join the family in Mexico over Thanksgiving to race in a triathlon, something I'd never done. With 3 weeks to go and no chance for any training. I told her that I couldn't possibly do that. Isabella assured me I could. I assured her I couldn't. She then told me something which I'm sure she's told many people here. She said, "Get out of your comfort zone." And I said, "I like my comfort zone." That's why it's called a comfort zone. Luckily, sometimes I took her advice. In 1991, Isabella urged me to go on a blind date with a wonderful woman she'd met at work. That woman is my wife. So, how could I repay her for that? In 2018, I introduced my dear friend Fran to her son Kase. This week they celebrated their 2nd anniversary. With Isabella, even skeptics like me have to believe in karma. She could change your life. Thornton Wilder wrote, "Those we have loved and lost would wish us to remember them as a more intensified realization of their reality. What is essential doesn't die, but clarifies. The highest tribute to the dead is not grief, but gratitude."
Hello, my name is Christopher. I'm Isabella's youngest child. These past few weeks and months have been really hard for me and many in the room. Fortunate for us, however, my mom was an avid practitioner of mindfulness and the most positive person I've ever met. She gave us many tools to remain happy when times got hard, one of which is the list of things I'm grateful for. So while there are countless things I'm grateful for, today there are a few that I want to focus on about my mom. I'm grateful for my mom's superhuman strength and unwavering positivity. If you talked to my mom in July, you would have heard about how happy she was that she was figuring out her pain in her back and finally able to walk a few miles again. You would not have heard about how her tumors had invaded her spine, near crippling her and putting her in the worst pain of her life. Even though her cancer journey typically was one step forward to take 2 steps backwards, she managed to be so grateful for the steps forward while not dwelling on the steps back. Her strength kept us all strong, even convincing many of us that she could possibly make it through this all despite her terminal diagnosis. I'll always be thankful to her for that. I'm grateful for all the beautiful flowers and that have been sent to, that are here today and that have been sent to us this week. While my mom always loved nature, after her diagnosis, she felt a particularly strong connection to it. Every time she'd visit me at school, we'd walk around the gardens and she'd point out the names of every single possible flower and plant. One of my friends even remarked that he thought she was Mother Nature herself. But most importantly, she always made sure to stop and smell the flowers and made sure we did too. She appreciated the small beauties in life, and I'm thankful she has shown us how to appreciate them as well. I'm grateful for pools. Pools, or really any body of preferably really warm water, was my mom's happy place. Every day she swam. Even if she had to be somewhere at 6, she'd wake up at 4 just for her laps. When we'd travel, it wasn't the cheapest or nicest hotel. It was the one with the long enough pool to get her laps in. My mom stayed committed to her happy place to the very end. Even when she only had energy for one activity a day, she'd float happily around her pool for hours. Once again, she never let her illness stop her from loving what she loved. And even if she had to go from swimming 100 laps to floating a very difficult 10, she was always at peace in her happy place. I'm grateful for the birds. As part of my mom's affinity for nature, she got my dad to place bird feeders all around our home. My mother was extremely concerned that no birds immediately flocked to her feeders. However, our property quickly became a bird oasis. My mom loved sitting outside just to listen to her birds and would tell us that after she'd passed, we'd hear her in the birds. Even though it's December, I've heard them a lot these last few weeks. And whether or not it's actually her, when I hear them, I'm reminded of my greatest blessing, my mother. Listen for her and let them be your blessing as well. Reflecting on my mom's life, I'm grateful she lived 1,000 lives in one and ultimately did almost all she set out to do. I can't say all because she never stopped wanting to do, see, and experience more. Still, I know my mom was proud and happy of the life she lived. So, today in her day of celebration, rather than be sorry for the immeasurable loss, let's be grateful to have known my mother's relentless, one-of-a-kind, and undying love. She will always be our biggest inspiration, and I'll first and foremost always be her loving son. Thank you for being here.
Blow my nose first. My mother has influenced me more than anyone else. She's been a friend, mentor, inspiration, teacher, travel companion, and of course, a loving mother. I'm closer to her than I am to anyone in the world. She embodies so many characteristics that I seek to emulate, especially an ability to juggle numerous responsibilities, perseverance, physical fortitude, open-mindedness, multiculturalism, selflessness, and most of all, strength of purpose. I didn't write those words today or last week. I didn't write them in the months after her diagnosis or in the 6 years since then. I wrote those words 13 years ago, in the fall of my senior year of high school, as the opening paragraph of my application essay to Princeton, which prompted, "Tell us about a person who's influenced you in a significant way." I'm thinking about what I wrote those years ago today for two reasons. First, to remind myself that my mother was that same determined, athletic, multifaceted, inspiring woman before her diagnosis that she was after it. And second, because it was one of only 2 essays in my life that I'd written entirely without her editing or revising help. This is the second. She was my go-to brainstorming, drafting, and editing partner since childhood, and surely the only person in the world who actually read my entire Princeton thesis. Over the years, I called her hundreds of times to get her advice, maybe thousands. Now, for this, I couldn't. But I realized I already knew what her response would be. She always said, the hardest part is the first step, or in this case, those first words. Just get something started and it will all work out from there. A good lesson, and one of many she imparted that had broadly applicable meaning. Chris has already mentioned the many ways she was a hero to us and others. At times, hearing about all of her perfections almost makes her sound saint-like. But saints are divine, and she was not. She was very human, and I want to remember her imperfections, because those are the reminders that we too can be imperfect and still potentially live the way she inspired us to. Okay, imperfections. First, she was so stubborn and refused to compromise, really ever. Yeah. Even when this made it difficult for others to spend quality time with her. Good luck getting one-on-one time with her unless you're willing to walk unlimited loops of the subdivision behind the house. And she had a habit of bending the truth or omitting key facts in order to coerce others to join her in something. like telling me we could cycle to Hopewell for brunch, my favorite meal, obviously, but neglecting to mention the 20-mile ride past the brunch place that she also planned for us to do. Second, her armor of psychological strength that we all admire was not impervious over the years. I remember one moment sitting in the car with her as we left New York after her experimental TIL treatment failed, a treatment that had required weeks of isolated living in the hospital, and she broke down sobbing. "Why did this happen to me? Why do I have to be sick?" she choked out as she cried, her courageous equanimity giving way to those very real and understandable human emotions of self-pity. She worked so hard to accept the things she could not change, but even she sometimes felt the weight of her predicament and got overwhelmed by it. Third, she was at times, well, let's say a little too direct, occasionally painfully so. While primarily reserved for anyone who was not one of her 5 children, even we sometimes got to experience the Arctic wind of my mother's disapproval. One time, after a hard treatment, my mother and I were arguing intensely about something entirely unimportant, and she stormed off. I wouldn't drop it, though, and when I kept at it, she spun around and snapped at me. "I don't have any confidence that you've actually taken to heart any of the lessons I've tried to teach you." That stung, and I never forgot it, because one of the things that was most important to her, especially over the last 6 years, was imparting to her children the lessons she'd learned in her life and teaching them to find the lessons in their own lives. And the truth is, on that day, she was right. I hadn't yet appreciated the importance of those lessons, and I needed that tough love moment to see how important it was to her that I listen and learn them. In the years since, I've tried to do a better job of listening to her lessons. And in the last couple of weeks since she died, I've reflected not just about all that she shared with us, but also tried to identify new lessons of my own from the grief of losing her. Lessons that, though she didn't share them with me directly, I've learned because of her, even if it was because we lost her. These are lessons in love and loss that would have sounded small to me before my mother died, but now feel very profound. The first is to take more videos than you think you need, not just pictures. Capture the random moments, not just the special ones. I wish I'd done more of that so I could remember her funny facial expressions and sometimes her very wacky opinions too. The second is to appreciate the subconscious comfort of knowing you can always call your mom, even if you don't, and just be grateful for that. There's no love like a mother's for her children, or as my mother would say, her babies. That true, pure, unconditional love. And I know now that even though I didn't call her every day, I could feel the comfort of just knowing she was there. So cherish that while you have it. And the third is, even or especially if you don't believe it will happen, prepare goodbye thoughts for your loved ones in case you die. I've thought a lot these last few weeks about how I wish my mother had sent me a note or message to read after she died. But that would have been impossible, considering she never actually believed she would die. Stage 4 lung cancer be damned. So do leave something for those around you just in case. A message for when they're feeling down or missing you. Something that might convince them for a moment that their mom believes they're strong enough to live a life without her in it. The biggest lesson, as she'd say, is that life is too precious to not be taking lessons from it at every opportunity, especially the hard ones. So with that, I want to apologize if my words today sound a bit unpolished. It's not my fault. My editor has gone on an extended vacation. And I'll conclude this remembrance with the exact same words I ended my Princeton application essay 13 years ago, because they're as true now as they were then. I model my actions, my decisions, and my aspirations off of my mother. In this way, I credit all of my accomplishments thus far and all of my dreams of the future to her. Not only have her genetics defined who I am physically and mentally, but also her guidance has shaped me emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. It is to her that I owe both who I am and who I will become, and for that, I am eternally grateful. Thank you for everything, Mother. I love you.
I'm Denise Boneg, Isabella's friend and yoga teacher. A couple of years ago, I asked Isabella what she considered to be her greatest accomplishment. She replied, "If I spend more time on my own work and less on other people's, I could probably be more successful by conventional definitions of success. And sometimes I wish for that. But I don't think it's in my DNA, and that I could be happy if I didn't feel like I was spending more time helping people and giving more to those around me." And later that year, I asked her to select her favorite sutra from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. She said to me without hesitation, Sutra 2.45 in chapter 2. By accepting your fate, you achieve self-knowledge and supernatural power. By accepting your fate, you achieve first self-knowledge and supernatural power. Isabella's understanding of the very essence of what it means to be human is at the core of our earthly journey. And it was uncanny, that is, a human as a remedy to a human. That was Isabella. Love forever, my friend. Adieu, ma chère Isabelle. Rest in peace.
My mom raised me to believe that I was capable of anything. It was perhaps the greatest gift she ever gave me and my siblings. And it was only possible because my mom herself believed, to a delusional degree, that there was absolutely nothing that we could not accomplish. And when reality did not cooperate, my mom did everything in her power to change it. I'm sure it's not just my siblings and I here today who can relate to that. The summer after my junior year of high school, I had just turned 18 and was thinking about what I would do after graduating. I was on YouTube and came across a video of ocean rowing. Before I'd even finished the video, I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I know what I'm going to do for my gap year. I'm going to row across the Atlantic." She laughed, and a second later she said, "Okay." Now, I don't want to knock my dad, who eventually became my biggest supporter, but he's a rational person. And like any rational parent would do when their teenager comes to them with a really, really stupid idea, he said absolutely no. So like any rational teenager, rather than take my dad's word as the final answer, I went back to my mom. Without a second of hesitation, she told me, "You worry about preparing for the row, and I'll worry about your father." See, my mom had a PhD in getting her way with my dad. Step by step, she helped me move further along in the preparations until before he knew it, my dad was the proud owner of a 23-foot ocean rowing boat located in Brixham, England. When we got to the Canary Islands for that final week of prep, my mom was struggling. She had terrible pain caused by the undetected cancer already metastasized throughout her body. She would be diagnosed a month later. Also, unbeknownst to me, the clueless 19-year-old, she was terrified about the row, as any mother would be. But rather than share any of that burden with me, she devoted her time to crisscrossing that sparse island, finding last-minute supplies for my journey. She spent hours writing words of wisdom and love on little scraps of paper so I could read one every morning I was out there. On the night before launch, I found out that my auto rudder, a device that steers the boat when you're asleep and is critical for solo rowers, was broken. As my coach and I frantically worked on the boat through the night, my mom sat there on the wet wood of the dock. She didn't know anything about the boat. She couldn't help, but in the rain and the dark, she sat there just watching us work, waiting to see if there was anything she could do. That whole night, she refused to leave my side. About halfway into the row, the boat capsized in a storm. This capsize was much rougher than the others, but after the boat flipped upright and I got back on board, I was initially exhilarated. The nav pole was completely smashed, whatever bags I had on deck had gone overboard, and everything else had been scattered across the cabin, but I was alive. I stood up and screamed back at the ocean. I felt invincible. Then the adrenaline began to wear off. I got back into the cabin and I started crying. I was terrified. I was scared the boat was going to capsize again, that the cabin latches wouldn't hold and it would flood, that I wouldn't be able to get to the life raft in time, and that I would drown and die in that cold ocean alone. The boat was still getting slammed with waves, and each time they hit, the entire cabin would tilt on its side, and I'd wonder if that was it, if I was going over. Curled up, shaking and crying, I did the one thing, the only thing that could make it all better. I called my mom. I wish I could tell you what she said, what words of wisdom she gave me, but that's not what I remember. What I remember is the dial tones of that satellite phone as it rung, how the only thing I wanted in the entire world was to be held by her, and then her voice, "How's my baby?" 5,000 miles away, waiting in the lobby of a hospital, she took my pain, she took my fear, she took my loneliness, and she gave me comfort and strength. No one else could have. My mom called me World my entire life. It was her nickname for me. I never really questioned it, when you use a word so much that it takes on a different meaning. But one day I asked her why. She told me that she was halfway through her pregnancy with me when her doctor in Hong Kong tried a new kind of prenatal testing. The results of the test were as bad as they could be. The doctor told her that there was a chance that the pregnancy wouldn't be viable, that I would be born with life-threatening complications, and that she would need to consider ending the pregnancy. So my mom prayed to God every night. She told God that she would give the world if I could be only... She told God that she would give the world if I could only be okay, if I could only be born healthy. And when God granted that miracle, when he gave her a healthy boy, she called me world because I was her world, what she would have given anything for. What I've realized since then is that my mom did give everything. She never stopped giving. And now that fire that burned in her, her sacrifice, her kindness, her strength, her hunger for life, it burns in me now, it burns in all of us. May we live lives that do it justice.
I met Isabella over 30 years ago in New York City when she started dating my old college roommate, David. They got married and moved abroad. I moved to California, but we stayed close over the years. Despite being on different coasts, as fate would have it, I was with them, both during the brutal diagnosis phase of her illness, then more than 5 years later in the weeks before her passing. The end was not easy. It never is, watching someone close to you go through all that she went through those past few weeks. But it gave me the privilege of experiencing firsthand the amazing bond that ties this special family together. It allowed me to see Isabella on a daily basis, her strong will, the absence of drama, her love for her family, and above all, her grace. To my friend, David, what can I say? After 45 years, we've come full circle back to Princeton to celebrate the love of your life. I want to thank you on behalf of all of us who loved Isabella for the love and the care you showed her every second of every day and every night until her very last breath. Somehow it seemed to me that the more her body grew weaker, the more peaceful she became. To my eyes, the end was beautiful. Isabella in her bedroom with a full view of the sand and the Pacific, with the family together at sunset each day, never leaving her side for a second as she peacefully left us. Isabella and I share the love of the works of the Sufi poet Rumi, who says, "I learned that every mortal will taste death, but only some will taste life." Isabella did not just taste life, she had a full feast. In honor of Isabella, I would like to read one of Rumi's last poems, written about his own funeral before he died 750 years ago tomorrow. When I die, when my coffin is being taken out, you must never think I'm missing this world. Don't shed any tears, don't lament or feel sorry. I'm not falling into an abyss. When you see my body being carried, don't cry for my leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm arriving at eternal love. When you leave me in the grave, don't say goodbye. Remember, a grave is only a curtain for the paradise beyond. You'll only see me descending into a grave. Now watch me rise. How can there be an end? When the sun sets or the moon goes down, it looks like the end. It seems like a sunset, but in reality, it's a dawn. When the grave locks you up, that is when your soul is freed. Have you ever seen a seed fallen to earth not rise with a new life? Why then should you doubt the rise of a seed named Isabella? When, for the first time, you close your mouth, your words and soul will belong to the world of no place and no time. Isabella, now you belong to all of us.
As you've heard several times today, my mother never really accepted that she was going to die. She'd talk about her diagnosis and her odds, but deep down, she really believed that she'd be the first person ever to beat stage 4 lung cancer. Generally, this positivity was a good thing. but it became an issue when, last year, I compiled a list of questions for her to answer. I wanted to know more about her life, and I wanted to have a record for after she was gone. But given the fact that she wasn't planning on going anywhere, she could never be bothered to answer. She was always busy and didn't seem to get why I needed this so badly. Each week I'd text her, asking if she'd finished writing up an answer yet, and she'd respond that she was preparing for a race or packing for a trip, but that she'd get to it next week. Ultimately, she answered many, but not all of my questions. Among the unanswered, which could have made this speech a lot easier, was what would you like to be remembered for? Now, I'll have to make do with some other ones, but there are a couple quotes that I want to share with you. Here's the first. All I've ever wanted in life was to be the best person I could be, intellectually and otherwise, and to contribute to making the world a better place by helping those around me learn and grow. For her entire life, my mother was dedicated to learning and teaching others. The best example of this is our home, which is in many ways a museum, designed by and built to my mother's exact specifications. For much of my childhood, I greatly resented the fact that we didn't live in a regular home, that we couldn't run around the house for fear of breaking priceless artifacts, that our floors were covered in rugs, hand-woven centuries ago and half a world away. Yet as I grew, I came to recognize the awe in my friends' eyes when they saw our home, and I started to seek out my mother, to give any newcomers the tour, so that she could share her knowledge, the interesting stories, and the facts that only she had about her collection. The second quote, I don't know how I survived, and I don't think I could do it again. Believe it or not, this isn't about surviving her cancer diagnosis or some extreme race. It's about surviving her child-rearing years. She was a very deliberate parent and worked tirelessly to make sure that we were getting every opportunity available to us. One example of the effort she put into our day-to-day was weekly schedules that she would type out, listing my hockey, my soccer, my chess, my swimming, and all my other practices, with details on meal and carpool planning in the margins. Jane and Vicente would do a lot of the seeing it through, because filling up that page, and sometimes additional, were comments and commitments from my other 4 siblings. She did all this while maintaining a job as an investment banker in New York. The jury may still be out on how we turned out, but it's no surprise that handling her treatment was easy compared to raising us. And finally, the third. Your father and I opened our hearts and home to most anyone with any interest in being part of our family, and I would hope that all of you would be as welcoming to others as we have been. I don't think this quote needs much explaining or any anecdotes. Rather, I'd ask each of you to take a moment to reflect on what your anecdote would be. Reflect on how my mother welcomed you into her heart. It's worth stating that a person cannot passively make as many friends as my mother had. She had to actively give a piece of herself to anyone who asked for it, but she was willing to do it because she wanted to make the world a better place. Towards the end, my mother had limited time and limited energy, but she never stopped sharing what little she had with the world. She never stopped opening up her heart, and hundreds of you who have come out here today are evidence of that. On November 29th, we knew the end was near, and I called my mother for the last time. As much as I wanted to, I wasn't allowed to say goodbye, because even then, in her weakest moments, she clung to the belief that she was just resting before her next adventure. And that's exactly the way I would have wanted it to be. Or, in her words, my entire life has been an adventure, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I love you, Mom.
My name is Isabella Livaudais de la Houssaye Crane. I am the third Isabella de la Houssaye of the lineage, and I'm proud to bear the name of my grandmother and my mother. Strong, profound women who showed me what it takes to lead and to lift others as I myself was lifted by them. Some of you may recognize the dress I'm wearing today. It was one of my mom's favorites and has seen many dance floors. I know you may be thinking, I can't believe Bella's already raided her mother's closet. But that's not true. I've been raiding her closet for years. Her clothes are a part of her being, and they have been a part of her that I have been close to for my whole life. My mom was as beautiful on the outside as she was on the inside, and she never did anything but with style. Her clothes were uniquely, unequivocally her. They were beautiful, sophisticated, and colorful. And most importantly, her closet was versatile. Between the cheap how dresses from Hong Kong and the many sweatpants, the heels, and the Solomon racing shoes, my mom had drawers and drawers of bike shorts, 90s work attire, and miniskirts. Half of my wardrobe to this day has been pilfered from her closet. It was a revelation this week to learn that one of the things I miss most about my mom is her beauty, grace, and femininity. These are traits that, though I had always respected, I had never before considered fundamental characteristics of my mom, outshined by her sheer strength, perseverance, and intellect. It hit me as we sat at dinner, my 4 brothers, my father, Fran, and Wyatt, that I will forever miss her presence and her warmth, her unconditional love, and for lack of a better word, her femininity. My mom, who had always been my mom, was also my only sister and my best friend. Too acutely, I realized she has left me the only woman in the house. Growing up, gender was largely not a factor in my childhood. My parents raised me as they raised my brothers, in school, in sports, and in life advice. All 5 of us looked up to my mom as a role model. It was easy to overlook her success and her setbacks as a woman, and to see her only as an achiever. Today, I want to pay tribute to the side of my mom that I have stood in awe of my whole life. As a woman, my mom gave up 10 years of her life to alternate between pregnancy and breastfeeding. As a woman, my mom felt compelled to sacrifice her career, a career that she loved, to ensure we had the best possible upbringing. On these 2 truths alone, my brothers and I are indelibly grateful to her for everything she gave and sacrificed. As a woman, my mom accomplished athletic endeavors and feats of endurance that even the top professional male athletes would struggle to perform. As a mother, she administered to us all in our darker moments. In our times of tribulations, it was her we sought out, and it was she who carried the burden of our sadness. She was my first Valentine, and my longest-running Valentine, with an impressive 2 decades of cards to show for it. I never understood why she loved Valentine's Day so much. She was not a particularly romantic person. But I know now it was her way of showing each of us that we were loved, even if we were alone. Despite the setbacks she may have faced, being a woman and a mother was the greatest joy of her life. And I know this because she left us a note in her final years saying that she wouldn't have traded the choice to be a mother for anything. I cannot imagine a more powerful role model to have growing up as the only girl in a household of boys. Although she was an idol to us all, smart, ambitious, adventurous, generous, her beauty and her grace are 2 aspects to her being that I uniquely seek to emulate. Indeed, everything I have done in life is to act, look, and dress like her, to succeed as she did, and to give back as she did, which is where I left off, because now I'm left with her clothes but no one to share in them. I'll end by saying this. My mom put our needs entirely before her own. We were the object of her time, care, and attention from the moment we were born until the last few months of her life, when it was she who finally needed us. The 6 years since her diagnosis passed all too quickly, as time tends to do, but it gave us, as kids, time to grow into adulthood with her consistent oversight and lessons. Lessons that live in each of us, regardless if you have known her for decades or whether you know just of her legacy. My mother did not go gently into that good night. She fought hard, and with her heart and body, she strove always to live another day, to walk another mile, and to smile another smile. Each of us should take her passion and commitment to living to heart, to live our days challenging ourselves and becoming all the better for it, to open ourselves to new cultures and new opportunities, and to experience life in all of its joy and all of its suffering. She will be with each of us always. If you are lucky, like I am, you'll hear her voice in your head, telling you to keep striving, repeating over and over how proud she is and how much you are loved. But if you do not hear her, I hope you see her in the springtime flowers she loves so much. I hope you feel her warmth and light in the dawn of each new day. And most importantly, I hope you surround yourselves with good, compassionate, and driven people, as she always did. Whether through phone calls, long walks in Princeton, or adventures around the world, she cherished each moment with you all. The people you surround yourselves with are the ultimate reflection of who you are, and I want to thank all of you for being here, as she was as lucky to be loved by many as we were to be loved by her.
When you arrived today, you received a white flower, and we invite you now to come down the center aisle and to place your flowers in baskets that will be in front of Isabella's casket. Let's start at the very front of the chapel and make our way row by row to the back. After you have placed your flower, we invite you to return to your seat by the side aisles.
Please join me in singing Amazing Grace. You can find the words in your booklet. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toiled and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Yea, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the veil a life of joy and peace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
David said, look at the fifth row, it's almost empty. Dearest Isabella, remember many years ago that long drive we took to the funeral of a friend tragically struck down while still in her 20s. We thought we were young ourselves, still in the childbearing years, and I at least had never previously contemplated being separated from you by death. You broke the quiet of the ride by asking me, if you were to die first, would I speak at your funeral? My initial response was no, and my reasoning was, if I had not succeeded in making it abundantly clear how much I loved you while you were alive, what would be the point? What would be the point of telling others about loving you after you were gone? You thought about my response for a long minute, and I remember your exact words to this day. You said, "Promise me that you will speak of me at my funeral. I want people to know who I was." I promised, and now, Isabella, I am obliged to fulfill that promise, even though I would rather die 1,000 deaths myself than be standing here now. The thing is, Isabella, while you may have thought you were not understood back then as this diminutive, impossibly soft-spoken woman from Louisiana, that is not who you became. What your friends and admirers saw in you was exactly who you were. All we got as your family was more of it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks per year. We experienced the Isabella whirlwind. It was exhausting, and it was exhilarating. At heart, you were an explorer. In every way, you wanted to test the bounds of the human condition. You didn't climb all those mountains, complete all those triathlons, or hike rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon in the 5th year of your cancer so that you could read about yourself in the newspaper. You did it so that you could prove to yourself that your body could cash any check that your force of will might write. You did it to show your children the value in perseverance, and you did it to show those around you that there is enormous untapped potential in each of us, and tapping into that potential is the most satisfying thing a person can do. Many times over the years, I would scrape you up at the end of a particularly grueling event, and I would tell you that at the pace you were going to wear out that little body of yours long before its time. And sadly, it was Princeton's own sports injury specialist, Dr. Lewandowski, who was the first to tell you that you did not, in fact, have a sports injury to your sacrum, that there was something terribly wrong. You said many times after your diagnosis that you did not want to be defined as a cancer patient or characterized as a victim, and indeed, cancer didn't change anything about you, but it amplified who you were and expanded your reach. You had always wanted to be a person of consequence, leading an impactful life. In the cacophony of the modern age, we tend to take our cues from those with fame, fortune, or exalted title. But you, who by sheer force of your example touched so many lives, inspired so many people, and catalyzed virtually everyone you met to venture outside their comfort zone, you were quite simply the most extraordinary person I have ever known. For me, as your husband these past 6 years, watching up close the courage and grace and consideration you demonstrate to those around you, even as things became exponentially more difficult for yourself, was simply awe-inspiring. To me, you represent nothing less than the triumph of the human spirit in the face of the greatest possible adversity. When we met, I fell in love with you for all the typical reasons that young men fall in love with young women. Through our many years navigating the stresses of two strong-willed people trying to make a life together, it wasn't always easy. Indeed, on our last anniversary, you wrote to me, "David, I am so sorry that I make it so difficult to love me. Isabella, I don't know if you ever really made it all that difficult to love you, but what I am sure of is how easy you made it to admire you and to respect you." Before we got engaged, I sat down and asked you what your goals were for a married life. Without hesitation, your 27-year-old self expressed a wish for 3 things. You wanted to have your first child before you were 30, you wanted to lead an international life, and you wanted to dance. Not professionally or anything, just dance. You danced with such joy, Isabella, and it was always such a pleasure to dance with you, but truth be told, over the years, dancing fell back in our priorities. Through the grind of daily life in the middle years, dancing was just all too infrequent. I am so sorry. I let you down. And now it is too late. In late October, young David wheeling you to the edge of the dance floor at the embassy party in Riyadh, helping you stand up so that you could dance a few steps with him before sitting back down in your wheelchair. The imagery of that moment will be forever seared in my mind. As to the international life, we did better. The obligatory stint in London, the postings to the Middle East and Australia, the countless trips and expeditions, and of course the blissful 90s spent raising our babies in Hong Kong. You almost fulfilled your entire bucket list. I'm sure your insistence on traveling to Uzbekistan in the last weeks of your life will become part of your legend, but I prefer to think about happier trips. I mean, for all of us as parents who are perceived as hopelessly over the hill in the eyes of our young adult children, who wouldn't have loved to have been in your place when impetuous Bella, already in Australia, called begging you to fly out to Australia immediately to cycle with her across Tasmania, because she really didn't want to do it alone, she had decided once she was there. And you were able to say, well, Bella, your father and I have already biked across Tasmania. In fact, I was pregnant with you at the time. You made Bella beg a bit, but in the end, we were on a plane the next day. I also prefer to think even further back to how you enjoyed competing with Kase and David to see who could visit 100 countries first. The time you complained vigorously when I disqualified Luxembourg from your list on the grounds that you couldn't say you had visited a country simply by being on a train passing through it. I had forgotten about those friendly disputes, but you never did. In 2019, when we joined David on his cycling trip across the Low Countries, the last afternoon ride took us from Bastogne in the Ardennes across the entirety of Luxembourg to Luxembourg City. When we got off our bikes in the quaint central square, I was feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment until I heard the first words out of your mouth, which were, "Stick that in your country visitation criteria." And finally, there was the first child objective. Isabella, perhaps it's being a little churlish at your funeral to suggest that maybe you could have told me that your first child by 30 objective was but an interim step on the way to your real goal of 5 by the time you were 35. But how lucky were we to have them, and how lucky was I that you were their mother. You nurtured and challenged them, you took them everywhere, you thrust responsibility on them at an early age. You taught them that there were no limits on their potential, that each day was a gift not to be wasted, and that they should finish whatever they took. Life for you was never about winning, it was always about following through and finishing. In the parlance of your daily lap swimming, we used to say, for the lap to count, you need to touch the wall. Sorry. Better that I don't speak extemporaneously. In your final weeks, you told me that you feared that things had been left unsaid between you and the children, so I promised I would tell them. To Kase, so much like you, when the two of you agreed on a plan of action for the family, the world was in harmony. When you disagreed, the rest of us would be entertained watching the two of you trying to bend each other to your will. To paraphrase one of your favorite songs, he's grown up just like you. Your boy is just like you. To David, despite how he challenged you, you never doubted his fierce love and loyalty. That second day during the Kazakh Ultra, when you and I were hours behind all the other competitors and we headed up the long valley to the finish, you spotted that one solitary figure outside the shelter of the yurt encampment, sitting there in the blustery wind, facing down the valley. You told me with total confidence, that will be David looking out for you, and it was. To your darling Bella, so much like you, not only in terms of outward appearance, but in terms of inner strength, I will surprise her by telling her how much you secretly admired what she has and which you did not, which was the flower child within her. I will tell her how you worried that under the pressures of everyday life, Bella would lose the idealism and purity of her thought, and with it her remarkable ability to light up a room simply by entering it. To Oliver, I will make sure he knows that you helped him so much getting across the Atlantic, because it was something he wanted to prove to himself. The memory you cherish more was what he wanted for you and for him, walking the Camino. I will tell him that the days spent walking and talking one-on-one with you gave your mother memories that she will cherish for an eternity. And to Christopher, I will tell him that you forgive him. When he turned 4, you tearfully asked him to stay 4 forever, and he solemnly promised to do so. I will tell him that you forgive him for breaking that promise. But I also will tell him that you never wanted to stop holding him as if he was 4. And as he got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you struggled to get your arms around even a part of him, he would get behind you and drape himself over you, engulfing you in the vast wingspan of his embrace. And all I would see peeking out from under him was the contented smile lighting your face. The children were the love of your life, and they were the only thing that mattered to you. In the end, you worried that you had failed them, that they would feel abandoned by you. But Isabella, fear not. Rest peacefully. When it comes to raising the children, you touched the wall. So now, Isabella, if you're still listening, I know you would chide me for having spoken too long. In fact, I would bet that you have moved on to more active heavenly pursuits. Organizing a yoga class for the archangels or a dance party for the heavenly host. But you have to admit, for better or worse, I fulfilled the promise I made to you in that car so many years ago. You may remember at the time I asked for nothing from you in return, but now I need a promise from you. Wherever you are, however long it takes, promise me that you will save your last dance for me.
I'd like to invite Isabella's roommates to come forward to the casket. I'd like to invite the members of the great class of 1986 to stand at your places. We're going to sing Old Nassau, and I hope you will help us all, lead us in the singing of that. This is Princeton's alma mater, and the words are at the back of your program.